T.B.Photo X1.5 TFX, and welcome back to another video. Well, it is a little bit past New Year's, a couple of days past New Year's, and it's 2018 finally. Or finally, yeah, it depends on your point of view, right? But anyway, well, Happy New Year's to everybody, and I'll see how it turns out this year for us all. But anyway, high expectations. But anyway, yeah. Well, what a surprise. I mean, a couple of days, I know I haven't uploaded in a couple of weeks now. It's because you have the final parts of school and so on, and you really need to focus on that, because I know that that's, at this point in time, it's the most important part in my life. It's school and doing well there. But anyway, I just have one semester left, and then I'm hopefully finished. But anyway, what am I going to talk a little bit about this video, or rather in this episode? Well, this is a little bit half scripted, half non-scripted, because I was taken aback, because it wasn't just New Year's, it's also 400 subscribers. I mean, I can't hardly believe it. But anyway, in order to celebrate, I think that it deems something a little bit better than just water, don't you? Here we go. So, if I do a little bit of a burp, that's because André Cloet, yeah, I can't really speak or pronounce French, but a little bit of champagne left over from New Year's. But anyway, and also, the patent pending cheat sheet is back, baby. But anyway, I thought about first doing a little bit about, like, last year, people who have departed, but no, I think that might be a future video, maybe, but I think this is supposed to be a joyous occasion, don't you? Excuse me, a little bit of an itch. This push broom, I'm a little bit, you know, should it stay or should it go? What do you guys think? Comment in the comment section below. But anyway, first of all, this is just a little bit of house cleaning then. I've already told you that I have one semester left of school, and I am planning to hopefully get out one new episode a week minimum. But anyway, I have a couple of ideas up here of what I want to do. I mean, I'm jumping a little bit back and forth here, and as I said, this is semi-scripted. But anyway, I know that I've done a couple of, you know, places already, like Uppsala, Stockholm, Vaxholm, Älvkarleby, Rörberg Airport, my hometown of Gävle, which I maybe will redo a little bit better. And I've done some more flash photography and so on. Oh, and I've even tried instant film for the first time now in a long while. And that's thanks to our friends over at the Impossible sorry, I meant Polaroid. That's basically, if I had to pick one photography happening or photo happening of last year, of 2017, that I think is basically one of the most brilliant happenings, it's how the Impossible project managed to acquire the majority stakes in Polaroid and managed to bring back Polaroid originals. So to you guys, cheers, and I hope for you to stick around for a long time in the future, so thanks for that. Well, I will say like Winston Churchill, or Sir Winston Churchill, champagne should be dry, cold, and preferably free. But anyway, speaking of some things that aren't free, I have actually thought about, when I'm doing my videos outside and so on now, I'm doing a little bit more photography with the D7200, because I do like the semi-digital method of, but anyway, I do enjoy doing the semi-digital photography with, you know, scanning film, but I'm also doing HDR because I really enjoy Trey Ratcliffe's style of photography, HDR. So I thought about maybe I should get a second camera that is more dedicated for film, or rather for videoing, I should probably say. So I already have a bunch of film cameras, and maybe that would be a future project. But anyway, I found a new film, or rather a channel on YouTube that I would really recommend to anybody out there who is interested in Minolta, of all brands, because there is this former NASA employee known as Gary Friedman of the Friedman Archives on YouTube, who is basically a Minolta and now also a Sony camera guru. And I would watch one of his videos just, just sitting back, enjoying something, watching on YouTube. And he talked about some of the most significant Sony cameras in his opinion. And one of them popped into my mind, and I started thinking, well, maybe that would be a good camera to have for filming or videoing. And it was none other than the Sony NEX7. Putting a picture of it here. And the reasons why I'm thinking about this camera is that, first of all, you can get it used for fairly cheap nowadays. It's an E-mount lens. Lens mount is E-mount, Sony E-mount, which means that there are tons of adapters, so I can use all my Nikon glass on this little pocket-sized camera. Secondly, it's the same megapixel count as the D7200, roughly. It's 24 megapixels, and it films in 1080p at 60 frames per second, so in essence, full HD. Even though I film mostly my stuff in 25 frames per second, which is basically the standard for, movie film. But anyway, 25 to 24 frames per second. But anyway, it also has an external mic input, so I have still my old Opteka, little shotgun mic. I will put a picture of it up here. And some other external microphones, like my little lavalier mic that I'm using for this. And so I thought about the Sony NEX7 as a in-the-field camera for videoing. But anyway, that was care of Gary Friedman. But also, I had a little bit of a shopping list up here, or rather a bucket list of some things that I thought about getting to improve my photography. So, first of all, currently when I'm doing flash photography and I want to use an off-camera flash, I use the Onsen 16-channel, remote flash trigger system, which is basically a glorified car key remote. But anyway, it works for what it is, but I started to see that it's not really that high of a quality. When I use it on the D7200, I actually have to put 2 fingers on the sender unit in order for it to make a good connection, in order for it to trigger the flash when I take a picture. So, what am I looking for? Well, I thought about doing a combo of two different little packs that I know I can get fairly cheaply on eBay. I mean, there are all of these wonderful flash triggers out there, like the Pocket Wizard systems and so on, but they are a little bit pricey and I'm on a budget, so I thought I would see some kind of budget-friendly things that still have gotten a fairly decent reputation for what they are. And it's basically Yongnuo. So, this is a question to all of you guys out there. So if we are 400 strong, maybe some of you have a little bit of inside knowledge for any of these. I'm thinking about getting a Yongnuo YN560 TX Mark II controller. It's basically, it looks like the lower part of a speed light, but in actuality it's just the sender unit that can actually control multiple flash speed lights independently. So you can turn on and turn off different types of speed lights from the controller unit. Yeah, and I thought I will get that with the addition of 2 Yongnuo RF605N flash triggers. And these are a little bit special because in themselves they can be used as remote. It turned out they can be used as remote camera triggers, they can be used as flash triggers, or I think they're even compatible with the 560 TX. So that might be a good investment, but anybody out there who knows for certain, and I hope I put pictures of them up here as well, so you all will know what I'm talking about. But in all essence, I'm looking for upgrading my flash trigger or remote flash triggering system from the OneSun little system. As stated, it's a good system for what it is, the OneSun, but it's very, very basic. So yeah, we will see how it turns out. But anyway, currently when it comes to editing photos, because this is the last part of my little bucket list of what I would like to get into at least in 2018. First of all, currently when I'm editing both video and photos, for photos and a little bit of video, I'm using Lightroom 6, which is still a great program. Then also I'm using Photoshop Elements 15. I basically use that to create my thumbnails and so on. And I use Pinacell Studio 16 in order to edit my video. So yeah, I know Pinacell Studio 16 is very outdated in this time and age, but it still works for what I'm doing with my video. So I'm mainly interested in updating my photo editing software, and it turns out, and this would probably be the first non-physical copy that I would buy of any type of program and it's the Aurora HDR 2008 edition for PC, and it's from Trey Ratcliffe. Okej, nu blir det här att jag måste prata i telefon. Yes. Oh, hey. Okay. Ja. Säg så. Hej då. Sorry about that, call incoming. But anyway, yeah, Aurora HDR 2018 for PC. I mean, I enjoy HDR photography, I still do. And this one is endorsed by Trey Ratcliffe, Mr. HDR himself, Senpai. But anyway, I really enjoy that type of photography, so I think I would really like to try that type of, little program. I know it's kind of expensive, but hey, it's something I just have to buy once, right? But anyway, well, 400 subscribers, that's really cool actually, but I've started to think a little bit about, or rather, what do you think is the biggest flop when it comes to gear from last year? We got some really, I know that this is kind of a little bit of a almost cutthroat thing when you talk about different brands because people are so brand loyal. I try not to be. I know that I enjoy Nikon, but I say that Canon, Pentax, Minolta, they all made really brilliant stuff in their own right. Sony, of course, Mamiya and Phase One, they all make brilliant stuff. Hasselblad, whatever. But there is one thing I've started to see a little bit more and more creeping into photography, and it's when certain parts are made by, if it's designed by engineers and designers, or if it's designed by committee. And that's a little bit strange that it starts to creep in, because we see more and more cameras being more designed by committee rather than users. And that's bad in my opinion. I mean, the biggest flop we've had in present time was some time ago when Rolleiflex had to unfortunately declare bankruptcy, because the reason they had to declare bankruptcy was that they were unwilling to change. They basically were starting to compete with their own used market. So when a company starts to compete with their own used market, they don't really have the same leverage in the marketplace as they used to. Because why buy a new product when a 50-year-old product is exactly equal? That's the difference. So actually, two cameras, and I'm actually going to take one Nikon and one Canon just to be non-biased, but both of these cameras are, in my opinion, they're cameras that were designed by committee rather than designers and engineers. First off, For Nikon, it's the successor to my camera. I have the D7200, and then we got the D500, which I actually started to realize was what's going to happen with the D7000 series, because whatever they make will be a contender for the D500. It will be tension within their own ranks. It will be, you know, they will be competing with their own product line. So what did they do? Well, they gave us the Nikon D7500. And I think there was one reviewer out there who, you know, said basically straight out that the D7500 is a castrated D500. And I'm starting actually to agree with that statement, because it doesn't really hold water, and it's basically less of a camera than a D7200 in my opinion. But also Canon, when they started to make the rumors about the 5D Mark IV, people were doing wish lists with the specifications that they wanted on that camera. But what we got was something that was so completely different from what people's expectations were that it wasn't even funny. And that's the sad part of the 5D Mark IV. It was basically so hyped up, and when the actual camera came, it became so, for lack of a better term, mediocre, that it basically fell flat. I know a lot of people enjoy it, and I'm not saying it's a bad camera. It's only that people were so hyped and they had so much love and admiration before it was even released. So when the product that actually came out, it turned out to be, not what people had expected. And that was also because Canon didn't want, in my opinion and my thought pattern, they didn't want to compete with their own product lineup, because this would take revenue away from what they actually wanted people to buy. And that's a little bit of a problem that I see creep up now in photography. Now we need to do a jump cut. And I'm back. Well, it's sad when we see these things happening, when a company starts to become wary about competing with their own line of products. And Canon, unfortunately, is one of those companies, or fortunately, depending on your angle of view, they have such a vast product range that they have the problem that they have to design new products with the comprehension that it doesn't compete with other products within the same company. And that's exactly what happened with Nikon. However, they would develop, if they would do a direct successor to the D7200, that camera, if it had become the fictional D7300, the fictional D7300, however they would have done it, would directly have competed with the D500. So what did they do instead? Well, they took the D7200 and removed a lot of features, added a few features that were good, like the tiltable screen and the relocation of the ISO button. So you now have a dedicated ISO button on the top of the camera instead of on the back side by the back screen. But they had done some other things with the camera that was completely unnecessary, that actually, quote, dumbed it down. By removing one memory card slot, removing the auto indexing tab, so you can't use legacy glass in the same extent as you would wish to, maybe. They made it a lower megapixel count. The D7200 is a 24 and change megapixel camera, while the D7500 is a 20 megapixel camera. And also they removed the ability to put on a vertical shooting grip. And all of these changes were basically made so it wouldn't compete with the D500. So you got the D500, which is the flagship now APS-C sensor camera for Nikon, and you got the lower tier D7500 with the the 5000 and 6000, what is it? No, the 5000 and the 3000 series. So you get 3 series of very inferior now APS-C cameras from Nikon, which are all good in their own right. It depends on what you as the photographer wants to do with the camera. But what makes me a little bit cross actually is that the D7500 is basically a camera that is purpose-built for G-series glass. And that means it's cheaper to buy a D7500 than a D500. But the cost of living with the camera will be more expensive for the D7500 buyers, unfortunately. I'm not saying it's a bad camera, far from it. It's a good camera, but it's limited in its user range when it comes to older glass. Without the auto indexing tab, the camera have problems metering correctly. It still has the in-camera autofocus, so you can use AF lenses, but if those AF lenses doesn't have the electrical connection to electromechanically judge, the f-stop, you're in for it. So it's a little bit of a problem in that aspect, in my opinion. But I'm not saying it's a bad camera. It's not. But it's a little bit of a testament to when a product is designed by committee rather than engineers, it can lose a lot of interest from some of the customer base because they know what they're looking at. So there you have it. And basically I saw a seminar a couple of weeks back by some guy named Magnus Lord, a Swedish guy. I think he's a doctor, and he talks about this, how companies change their policies and how they change and evolve, and how that can be both beneficial and non-beneficial. I mean, we have the prime example now with Kodak, Eastman Kodak, because this year, remember, one of the highlights of 2018 will be the proper reintroduction of Kodak Ektachrome and the new 8mm camera by Kodak. I mean, we're looking forward to that, even though it's now known that the camera will be much more expensive than was first estimated. Okay, fine, I'm not in the market for one of those cameras, but I really am in the market for what Ektachrome is going to become, and maybe also what the Super 8 will become. That's what the future holds. We'll see. But anyway, it's a little bit of that when the CEO of Kodak goes out and tells the public right off that Kodak feels like they have an obligation to preserve film. Because the majority of the revenue Kodak makes today doesn't come from film, it comes from industrial printing. So they really do industrial printing, but they will continue with film even though they don't make as much revenue on that, because they feel it's an obligation to not letting film die, which is a honorable commitment for them. But we have also, you have to really see if that's actually the whole story, which it seldomly is. But anyway, you can see it in the positive light that they're bringing back Ektachrome, and also that they're bringing back a new Super 8 camera. But what Magnus Lord talked about was about, is cost saving and organizational cuts the best way to improve productivity and efficiency? And that's a little bit of every type of company. And from the backdrop now, when we have seen this, that happens with both Nikon and Canon, when their products starts to almost compete with each other within their own product lineups, you have that problem. Because Lord took up, Edward Deming's theory, which is the 95-5 theory, which makes it so that 95% is working mode, the mode in which a company operates. And the mode will define the results. So basically, you have this old Chinese proverb that says that only a fool does the same thing over and over and expects a different result. So if we strive for a new result, we need to change the working mode. So that's a little bit what we see here, that in order, the D7500, they changed it in order for it to not compete with the D500. And the same goes for the 5D Mark IV, that they changed it in order to not compete with the Canon Cinnamon line of cameras. So, even though Magnus Lord talked about healthcare in his little seminar, he talked about that, first of all, competence is important, but it's still channeled through the current working mode, and that's what yields the result. And that's what Sway-Taka did when they made, the first real, consumer-grade digital camera that was made by Casio in 1995, was made by Hiroyuki Sway-Taka, and it was the Casio QV10. And they had to make that in secrecy because the company didn't see it. The committee, so to speak, didn't want that camera to be made because they thought it would be a money pit, because Sony had just a few years before that, in the 1980s, they had launched the Sony Video 8 system. And that's when Sway-Taka and his team of engineers started to make that little Casio camera under the table, so to speak. They actually nicked parts from other departments at Casio in order to make that camera into a reality. And luckily he did, because it basically transformed photography as we know it. So, what Lord talked about then was that to only work with a result is like arguing a receipt. Because you can tell, if you have a couple of employees underneath you, and you get from higher up that you need to improve your results, and you go down and tell your employees that you need to shape up and you need to make better results. We don't touch about the operating mode of the company, but we basically just demand a new result. And that's when it comes back and bites you in the backside, so to speak, that we do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, which is bad. So, what Lord pointed towards was a survey that was made in the 1990s when a couple of investigators looked at European companies and how they evolved their business models. And the mean efficiency increase during this time was 9%. So they looked at work ethics and quality. I mean, what it meant was that the result of any given company can be channeled into the following parts. It's quality, and it's time of delivery, work environment, and productivity and efficiency. Which basically means that quality, it's the quality of the product. Time of delivery, how fast does it take to make the product in order to ship it to the customer. And that's a little bit what we have seen with cameras, that if you delay a product, you can make hype about it, but also you will lose some interest. Case in point, the Kodak new Super 8 camera. It has been delayed and the cost has increased, and thereby some people are less interested in the new system. So, yeah, but they want to maintain quality maybe. But how does that impact work environment and, so on? Well, what they had shown then was that they divided up the companies investigated into which have been successful in implementing change and the ones that have been unsuccessful. And the successful companies had basically worked with 0 defects. That was being to work out all the bugs in their product. Just in time, which was workflow, which basically meant that they wanted to have the flow of production being uninterrupted. And then was process improvements, And that goes a little bit hand in hand with just-in-time, because just-in-time was to reduce bottlenecks in the production, and process improvements is how can we make this better. In all honesty, then, what Lord said was that if you start to work on bettering your quality by changing your working mode, all the other aspects of your result will increase. So, and also one big advantage is a little bit of a Japanese, I would say, a little bit of a Japanese principle of working, and it's that they gave more, more bigger responsibility to lower tier co-workers. In order to do that, is that the people who are making the product and the people on the floor gets more responsibility, and thereby also getting a little bit more saying in how the entire process can be, changed for the better, hopefully. And that's how you get a good representation on how a working mode can be, changed and made better. Because the unsuccessful businesses, the ones that hadn't raised their, efficiency, the things that they had actually been hardly working with was, first of all, moving the business. It would be like, people who move their business abroad because labor is cheaper. That would be a example. Reorganization, to remake the entire meta paradigm of the entire company was reworked. Cuts and new IT systems. These were the core changing points that the unsuccessful companies had all implemented. Moving business, reorganization, cuts, new IT systems. They had been proven to be unsuccessful. Of course, there were, exceptions to these rules, but these were the core themes the researchers had been able to pick out of their survey. But to work with zero defects, work with just-in-time, process improvement, and bigger responsibility to lower tier co-workers or co-workers in general were all strategies and mode changing work structures that had been successful. And you can see this also then in camera manufacturers like Impossible Project, because they wanted the Polaroid name. So in order to make a quality product that was the Instax photo of, or not Instax, excuse me, the Polaroid-like film of Impossible Project, in order to make that high quality and make it, really appealing to us consumers, they were able to heighten their product's effectiveness and influence, and by that they managed to get high revenue, a high company revenue, high enough in order to buy Polaroid, the Polaroid brand name, and now Polaroid magically is back, risen up like a phoenix. The same can be said for, lomography. Lomography started, with, the Lomo camera, and to reintroduce the world to the quirky nature of the Diana. And all of these, stuff that they managed to do with all their experimental hipster type photography, they managed to spin that into making film and also doing, Kickstarters for their Petzwald lens lineup. All of that has actually been by them, working with, a mode-centered, way of looking at it, in my opinion. But here is basically that, as you can see with Nikon, Canon, and also Rolleiflex as a prime example, they have been so focused on the result that they haven't really lifted their gaze up to the working mode. And that's starting to cost it starts to cost them, unfortunately. If you look at one of the most polarizing channels on YouTube when it comes to photography, you know, Ken Wheeler, he talks about, you know, how quality is decreased when people like Nikon outsource their Nikkor line of lenses to other manufacturers. You also have it with people like, what's they're called now, Vivitar. They were masters of outsourcing. But outsourcing can be good and bad, but if you outsource and you look at what Magnus talked about in his seminar, if you focus on, you know, moving the business, you have a higher percentile chance of decreasing your revenue and decreasing effectiveness. And that's a little bit what is interesting for me. But anyway, I think I don't need to stop rambling about this, but I would like to hear you guys now. What's your take on it, that how the photography industry is changing and how these new upstarts are gaining traction while some of the, you know, seasoned veterans are starting to maybe not struggle, but they're not as high and mighty as they once were. But anyway, as always, this is Tobias Bergström from T.B.Photo X1.5 to FX, and I'd like to see you guys in the next video. And as always, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.